Good day. Subano is an African proverb that I say everywhere I go. It simply means I see you, I hear you, and I honor you. I stand as tall as I do, for I stand on the backs of my ancestors. Had it not been for their struggles, and many of them who lost their lives on our behalf, I would not have this privilege to be able to pass on the baton of knowledge. My brothers and sisters, where there is knowledge, there is power. I say to you again, I see your spirit, I hear your voices, and I honor your presence on this show today. My name is Queen Jefferson, and you've just tuned into The Voices. We are so excited that you're here. I am amazed and astonished at the fact that we have an exciting co-host today. His name is Mr. Roach Brown, the director of Inner Voices, and he's also a producer and a host on WPFW. Thank you so much, Mr. Roach, for coming.
Thank you for having me, and Merry Christmas to you.
It's always Christmas around here.
That's right.
The executive producer and myself would like to take this time right now to thank all of those who took the time to vote for the Voices program. As of 2014, we were the #1 health community show for Community Choice Awards. Thank you so much. Today on the program, we are so excited to have some wonderful, wonderful guests on today's program. Today we will have Mr. Kevin McNear with the Washington Informer.
Great to be here.
And we're also delighted to have Ms. Livingston, a licensed clinical social worker who works with couple therapy and family therapy. What can we say today about positive conversations? Talk to us a little bit about the history of the Washington Informer.
Well, the Informer's been in existence 50 years. Dr. Calvin Rollard began it, and his daughter Denise now is running the show as the publisher. And one of the things he wanted to do, and we have continued to do, was to present positive news. You can read lots of papers or turn on the television and radio and hear a lot of bad things about black folk. And that doesn't mean we don't sometimes do some bad things.
Right.
The problem is, for all the good that we do, we get very little exposure. And so one of the things, if you read our paper, you'll see we're not going to put something on the front page that talks about crime and death and all the other destructive things. We want to find some stories about people whose voices matter, who make a difference, who maybe do something very small in society's minds, but for children in the Southeast, it changes their world. And those are kinds of stories.
Let me ask you a question, Kevin. I know you have an extensive history in journalism all over the country. And you work with a lot of black papers, press, etc.
Yes.
How would you rate the Washington Informer with other black press papers around the country in terms of the content, in terms of the positiveness? They don't have no negativity, nothing about corruption, nothing about politicians. It's always about education, the spelling bee, programs are going on in the city.
Sure. Well, yeah, this is my 19th year as a reporter, and my 7th city.
Wow.
So yeah, I've done this most of my life, and I mean I would rate us right at the top. And actually, I think the Informer may be underrated in many times. When you look at the quality of other papers, certainly where I started, the Michigan Chronicle is still an outstanding publication. I think the paper in St. Louis is still outstanding. You know, even the Miami paper is good, Miami Times. But
those are black papers.
Those are all black papers, you know. But oftentimes, as I said, we want to go to the crime and all those things. And when you do that, what you don't do is tell other stories.
You know, Ms. Livingston, one of the things that you deal with is couples as well as family therapy. When you think about the psychological effects of slavery, how does that play a role in the communications of the African American community?
Well, I think in the African American community, there has been generational transfer of some of the hurt and trauma that our forefathers and ancestors experienced. And so we have passed that down generationally. And so we see that with some of the violence that we have in some of our relationships. We see that with some of the violence we have in our communities. And I think that the slavery experience for our ancestors is really carried out even in today's society along the way.
Go ahead. I got a question. You just said something about slavery and the pain and suffering they went through.
Yeah.
And you're saying that they passed it on to the future generations, that pain and suffering?
Yes, yes. That experience, that trauma tends to be generational unless there is something that comes in and sort of truncates that and gives a different experience. And we have had generation after generation after generation of trauma. And so when you have started with slavery as your backdrop or as the foundation of our history here in the Americas, we have then going forward all the way through Jim Crow and segregation, and even today where our young boys and even our young ladies are finding themselves in relationships where there's violence, but also our Black lives don't matter in our communities. And so slavery is still a part of everything that's going on in our lives, the trauma from that. And we even have sexual slavery and trafficking that's happening for many of our young girls.
You know, many people don't talk about the spiritual abuse that is in a lot of the places of worship. Can you speak to that, either one of you?
Well,
and you being a minister as well.
He's an elder.
Elder.
You know, I think many times, was it absolute power corrupts absolutely, is one of the things I believe. And I think sometimes for all of the I want to be in charge, I want to be at the top, it takes a very special person to be at that top and to remain grounded. You know, I pastored 2 years. I said, you know what, I need to move out of this way, because I was not the person that could maintain that. It was just it was a lot of pressure. You know, and I believe that oftentimes people try to move to that seat for the wrong reason. I mean, it's not to be called to ministry is one thing. To be called to be the pastor
is a difference.
Quite different.
It's a difference. And that can be abuse if the wrong person is in that position.
Or remains too long.
Miseducate other folk.
And when we're talking about positive communication,
That's right.
I mean, you're a POW.
That's right. You know, you just said something. I wrote a poem about 30 years ago, and the poem was about a black woman who was holding a black baby. And she had a beautiful bush standing at the top of these long stairs, and she had the baby with nothing on. He's about 8 months old. And he had a look in his eye like he was an old man. And one of the lines in the poem that came back to what you just said, can a baby feel a kiss full of pain and one full of love?
Wow.
Can the baby taste the kiss and know they ain't the same? And you just said it. That pain has been transferred, and our kids are going through this same thing, acting out and this kind of hurting each other violently. And don't even, I go over to jail every Thursday night to meet with guys inside of the DC jail, and I ask them, why did you do this? And one guy got 2-3 murder beats, shot 2-3 people. I said, why? He said, I don't know, it's just something to do.
But hurt people hurt people.
There you go.
have been
Exactly.
hurt.
All right.
There you go.
In your spirit and in your countenance, you have that's what I'm going to do further. I don't have that experience of being loved and nurtured, and I don't have that that tender touch. I've been hurt, and so all I know is hurt, and so all I'm going to give you is hurt.
There you go.
I can't do anything.
Because you can't give what you don't have.
You don't. You can't. You can't.
You know, many people think that you can. It's like, oh, I'll pray my way out of this, or I'll get enough education and educate myself out of this. But if you have not addressed the core issue,
Absolutely.
you know,
Right.
And it continues in our community in not only in hating other people, but in self-hate, We have a lot of self-hate in our community. We have young girls who hate themselves, and they mark themselves up with tattooing and the piercings and the different things like that, and the wanting to look other than African American. They want to do things to their bodies. To I think there was in the news not too long ago a young lady who was arrested for injecting epoxy and something else to enhance and enlarge. Was that in Florida?
And it went wrong.
And it went wrong.
It went really wrong.
It went really wrong. But it's out of self-hate. Why is it we can't love ourselves the way we are now? And it's because we were not loved along the way. We don't matter. We're marginalized.
Well, I think that's part of it, but I think also the other part of it is we don't see enough images of ourselves that tell us
that
we
are
positive.
There you go.
That we are acceptable. You know, I have a daughter, and I mean no harm when I say this. My oldest is 25. And her hair is about here, and you know, she started doing different things with her hair. And I said, you know, God gave you hair to here. He didn't give you hair to here. Why do you need to have hair to here? I just want to know. Because why? She says, well, that's because, I said, see, I love you just like this. This is how God loves you. I don't really want you to, I want to keep it where God gave it. And it's beautiful because God made it that way. I mean, I had to have this conversation with her as an adult, but I think when we don't see images, you know, of little black children holding little black dolls, or little scarred up black,
You're right.
black
You're
boys,
right.
we don't see enough of them. That's why the press still matters. I mean,
It does.
you asked me the other day, you know, what about the Black Lives Matter? I said, for me, that's a hashtag. For me, Black lives will always matter.
Always.
That's why
Always.
I go to black church,
Always.
I live in the black community, and, I'm a black member, and I can't not be black no matter what I do or say. I'm black.
Absolutely.
And I love being black. Now, my mother taught me to love me as black. But many times we're not seeing something that says, I can aspire to it. And I don't mean Kanye and the basketball players. I mean just a brother like this or a sister like you. These are people that we should show and lift up so that children can say, wow, I really can do what she's doing. I can do what she's doing, and it's not impossible. But if they don't see it, see, we grew up with doctors and lawyers and teachers and preachers all over the hood. And if you didn't do right, they jumped on you. Now, we don't see them anymore. They moved out.
But I think your paper is relevant in that it does give a platform for the positive things that are happening that we don't hear about. I don't think as a black culture we beat our drums well enough. We don't talk about the positive things that are happening. And so therefore, when we only have a steady diet of the negative, the reality shows where we're calling each other the B word and pulling hair and fussing and fighting, when that's all that we see and that gets the loud voice, then our children and the generations behind us, that's all they're going to know. They have nothing else to emulate. There's nothing for them to follow.
You know, one of the things that add to that is like the fastest growing population in America is black women. Incarceration. And you're talking about love and not hurting each other. When the kid grew up and don't have no love in his house, they don't know what love is.
Absolutely.
And when they come out on the street, I grew up, came up with an analogy, why are we shooting each other and killing each other? And they said, we're like crabs in a barrel.
In a barrel.
So what I did, I went and got a barrel, put crabs in, cut the fire on, put hot pepper on the crabs, put beer in there, and put the top on, and laid 2 bricks on top. And the crabs trying to get out. You never heard no crab say, excuse me, after you can get out first. You on fire.
You gonna get out.
You getting out of there. It doesn't matter who you step on, who you're hurt. That's what it is. They talking about, we're like, sure, we got people living in perpetual poverty. People don't have money for weeks or months. You know what I mean? And when they hurt somebody, they run into a 7-Eleven and take $100 and shoot 2-3 people. That's a desperate, lost individual. When I said at the beginning about the black women are the fastest growing population, grandmas has been eliminated. Grandmas was a traffic cop in our families and our communities. We don't have grandmas, man. The grandmas are 30, 35 years old. They got their hair all done. They got that little thing in the butter. They're getting that little injection and the Botox, you know, and granny looking sexier than the daughter. And nobody, something else I've never heard in 20 years. I grew up and they tell little girls, keep your legs closed. I haven't heard that in 20 years. Everybody, keep your legs closed. A little lady don't act like that. Why don't you be, you don't hear none of that.
Well, you know, this has been an exciting time that we've had. You know, one of the things that I know is that if we can continue positive dialogue like this in our places of worship, in our homes, in our communities, on air, we can make a difference. Do you have any closing words, Mr. McNear?
I hope people continue to read us, to support us, and to give us your feedback. Let us know what we're doing wrong, and let us know what we're doing right.
And I believe that it's important for us to continue to support and uplift the generations coming behind us. Our generations behind us need to know their history and need to know where we came from.
Thank you for tuning in to the Voices program. We have been having a great conversation, and we've been talking about positive communication in the African American community. And we're so fortunate to have our special co-host, Mr. Roach Brown from WPFW.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Miss Livingston, you were talking about positive communications, and you were talking about passing on some of that pain.
Yes.
You know, I keep thinking about getting a whooping. We didn't call spanking. Getting a whooping. Going outside to get the switch, and we had to pick a big enough one to whoop us for something that we did. That's a part of the abuse.
It is a part of passing along that pain and passing along that that hurt that we felt from the moment we stepped foot on this continent. And I think that we carry that along the more we do whoopings instead of using corrective behaviors and teaching our children from a positive place. We need to have more positive role models in our communities so that our youth have someone to emulate. And they're there, but I don't think we publicize them. We don't bring them to the forefront. So I think that we have this intergenerational transfer of pain and trauma, but we can stop it. We can interject love and support and positiveness along the way to help our children bring that forward as well.
I understand what you're saying, but let me ask this question. How can you inject love when they never had love? They don't even know about love. What do we do with them? What do we do when they don't know nothing about love?
He's speaking to you.
How do we get them in that love mode?
I think it's our generation that needs to, because we did know some love, because Big Mama did love us.
Yeah.
She didn't only whip us.
In the only way that she could.
In the only way that she could. And so Big Mama has to come back into play. We have to get back in touch with our inner Big Mama.
Inner voice.
And our inner voice, exactly. And bring that forward with the love and the support that we had in our community, and stop focusing so much on the whoopings and the abusive relationships that are coming from all of this, because it is transferring into adult relationships with men and women and even date rape.
Does this transfer also make is prevalent in domestic violence situations where how does that come into play?
Absolutely. I think it is a part of that. I think that what happens in a traditional husband and wife type of relationship, or male and female type of relationship, that I think that you come in, the man comes in and he's had such I guess such an experience out in the workforce where he has been brought down and beat down, and that he brings some of that into this relationship he has.
Demoralizes
and
that brother.
And he's been demoralized, and so he demoralizes his woman, he demoralizes the children. He brings that into the home. Now, I mean, and there's some variances on that, of course. I mean, that's not, I'm generalizing here a bit, but he saw it in his home. He saw his father beating his mother and beating him as a child. And so he knows, that's all he knows that love is about. And then that child passes it on to the next generation. His child passes it on to his wife or his relationship.
How can we break the cycle? We need a positive communication, and that's part of what the places of worship is supposed to provide. But not only is without just not looking at the places of worship, how can we in our communities change the way people are thinking and believing that their life is going?
Each one teach one. Each one has to come. You have to take one. I have to take one. You have to take one. And we have to pass along what we know and what we knew growing up in terms of the love that we had. We have to kind of pool it together a bit.
So pass that baton on.
Pass that baton on.
knowledge.
Pass that knowledge on. Because if we don't, we're going to see many more families that are affected by domestic violence and child abuse and just violence in the street and in the community.
You know, Mr. Brown, one of the things that you were saying earlier in a interview, you talked about the fact that so many of the men that are incarcerated, that they're really not given a chance. And when they are given a chance, then it's kind of where they feel like, okay, we're going to still demoralize you. We're still going to treat you different because you have a pass. And we're not going to really help you. We're going to make you feel like we're being helped. And then that again breaks down that relationship that that wife or that relationship that that girlfriend has.
You know, on my show, we did an article about can you live without ever being touched? Touch. Can you live without a kiss, a hug, or a touch? You got men, women, and boys and women in prison, and you can't touch another human being. Women prisoners are allowed to hug or touch each other when somebody's kid died or somebody died in the family, but men are not allowed to touch. And you have men and kids and women living 20, 30, 40, 50 years without a hand, without a touch, without a hug, without a kiss. And you try to get these folks again to be in touch with love, all they want to do is just to be touched. So when you take that, in the 13th Amendment of the Constitution states that slavery shall be abolished in these United States except as punishment. So the 2+ million people in prison, 67% are us. They don't have no contact. We can't reach them. So we have to do something, just like I'm glad you're saying what you're saying, to transfer that pain. We've been going into prisons trying to do things. What you're doing with divorces. The guy just left us, Kevin McNear. He worked for the Washington Foreman, and Calvin Rolock had a saying, if it is to be, it's up to me. So what can we do? If it is to be, it's up to me. And he came with this saying, and he's been motivating and inspiring people, even though he's gone. His daughter. We've been talking about the same thing. How do we get love back into a relationship where love has been destroyed, obliterated, knocked down? If you tell a kid I love you, they call you an MF. If you just say I love you, you don't love me, and they don't know what it is, and they're afraid to show that kind of stuff. So we got a big lady, you have a tremendous job in your hands.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think, you know, we even see it with the pipeline preschool to prison. And they start with suspending our children for taking a cookie or not wearing the right uniform. And then when the child is excluded from his education. And so then he has all this time to be out in the street and be finding things to do that we wouldn't want them to do. And then they end up in prison because when they come back to school, they're so far behind. They've been suspended. They've been expelled. They've been put out. And Michelle Alexander has a book, The New Jim Crow. And she talks about this, that this is the new slavery. This is the new era that is ushering in for our children of bondage. And so all they know is the violence. But I think those of us who have a voice and have a platform, and even just if you don't have a voice and a platform such as this, if you can reach one child and touch one child and be involved with one young person and help them change their life and show them love and compassion. And what happened to the village that if I messed up in front of your house, you would have spoken to me and corrected me, and by the time I got back down that street to your house, to my house, my mother knew about it, and everybody along the way. We have to begin to come back, and we have to say to the children, listen, that's not right. Let's stop doing that. Here's something different to do. Here's another way to do something.
You know, you're talking about our culture and how if you do something, you may get 3-4 whippings before you get home.
Right.
Well, I don't want them to have a whooping, though.
I mean,
but I want somebody to speak to you. You
had the whole community raise you, discipline, etc.
Yes.
With gentrification, it means elimination.
Yes.
Right now, we don't have one black restaurant or nightclub in Washington, D.C. In 1968, we had 3,060 black businesses in Washington.
Wow.
This is 2015. We got less than 20 black businesses. And the last club or nightclub for us at Ball closed last week on George Avenue, Chuck's and
Oh,
Billy's.
right.
So when gentrification comes, you look up a building and there's all new bars and restaurants. So gentrification takes our village. Our village has been gentrified.
Yes.
It's been eliminated.
Yes.
So we don't have no
yes.
way for us to go and hang. And that's a part of the culture. They do something now on 14th and Belmont, none of us are there. They're corrected. Or, or the deal with trying to rectify that behavior.
But-
we don't have that no more.
But we're going to have to lean in, and we're going to have to find opportunities to engage with the children and engage with whoever's next to you, whoever's right there by you. Engage with them and be a voice of positivity and a voice of encouragement for them, and say, stop, that's not okay, that's not right.
You know, the Voices program was designed with the belief that our ancestors speak to us, for us, so that we can begin our healing.
Absolutely, and I believe that. I believe that's part.
We cannot start our healing until we start with loving the person in the mirror.
Absolutely, absolutely.
See, because many times we want to branch out into the community, into the places of worship, into our families, but we have not stopped. I know a minister today. He is a gifted minister, but he has not learned to love the person in the mirror. When you, gifts and callings comes without repentance.
Yeah.
So, you know, so if you have a gift, stop, hear that inner voice, listen. You know, I am so glad that you have come, because we need to hear a spiritual, anointed voice that's crying out in the wilderness like yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really, one of my things that I say to parents is get in touch with that inner big mama, that inner voice, because we need to hear that voice. Our children need it desperately, because they're hearing a whole lot of voices that aren't okay.
You know, I asked a question why you call it Voices. I created a group 44 years ago called the Inner Voices. And we came out of prison putting on plays, but everybody misinterpreted that. They thought because we came out of prison, we were putting on, speaking from inner voice from inside. No, it's about getting inside of that inner voice.
Wow.
Yes.
When you get in touch with that inner
Powerful.
voice, it's never
That's
wrong.
powerful.
It's never wrong.
If you follow that inner
Come
voice,
on now.
that's what life is about.
That's it.
In order, what we try to do, going to the jail and meeting prisoners inside, we go all over the country talking to prisoners, and we try to get them to connect with that inner voice, that man in the mirror. And if you can get in touch with that, that's the beginning of getting on that path to being redeemed and being loved and bringing our community and the village back, because we need help desperately.
And if you don't look in the physical mirror, look in the eyes of your
There
brother,
you
of
go.
your
Absolutely.
sister. How many, and when we were growing up, you were taught to look in the eyes of that man, look in the eyes of that woman. So look in the eyes of your brother and your sister and say, I love you. You're going to make it.
There you go. You know, you see kids walking down the street, and I see 4 or 5 young black boys walking down the street, and folk cross over. I don't. I walk right up to them. I say, how are y'all doing? What's happening, man? What's going on there?
What's going on?
You know, anybody got a pick? And when you break the ice, you can reach.
Yes.
People are afraid of our own kids.
Yes.
They
yes,
are.
They're afraid of our own kids, and we got to break that cycle.
We thank you for tuning into the Voices program. Only what you do for Christ will last. I am so thankful and so grateful that you've taken out this time. I trust that you take the time to look in the mirror and say, God has blessed me with a wonderful person inside me. Love you.
Beautiful.
Be blessed.